Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of Social Services, Housing and Community Safety Scrutiny Committee on the 13th of March 2025. I am Councillor Charlotte Goldsworthy and I will be chairing this meeting. Before we move on to the next agenda item, please note the following. This meeting will be recorded. Please can you ensure that all your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting? Members and officers who are present in the chamber, please use their microphones when speaking. When asked to raise your hand, can members who are virtually viewing this meeting raise your electronic hand? Members who are in the chamber, please use your physical hand. For those members virtually viewing this meeting, please can you keep the chat function for urgent IT issues and not for questions and comments. I wish to remind members signing in remotely of the legal obligation to have their cameras switched on during this meeting in order to be seen and heard while participating in council business. I'd also like to remind members as well that we've got a visit to Base 15 next Friday. And it's good that lots of you have actually confirmed now. I think there's 7 confirmed to attend, so that would be good. And so I will move straight on now to agenda item 2. Are there any declarations of interest? Helen?
5A. I've got a close friend working for Adveriad.
Okay. If any members have declarations, obviously Ellen's just made it obvious she has. Agenda item 3. You will see the minutes attached at pages 5 to 30 of your agenda pack. We will take the 3 sets of minutes together. If you feel these minutes are an accurate record of meetings, I will propose, can I have a seconder, please?
A second.
If members do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that these minutes are approved.
Chair, I can confirm those minutes are approved.
Thank you. Agenda item 4. We will now move to consider the reports as selected by this committee for consideration. We will go straight into 4A, which is the Youth Justice Plan. Please can officers now provide a brief introduction to the report, please?
If I may, Chair, just introduce Ruth Griffiths, who is the new Principal Officer for Youth Justice, along with Family Support Services, who will give a brief introduction.
All right. Year 2024-25. I'd like to note an error, type an error that has been amended, and also a change in the recommendation in the report. So that's now been commended to Council. So the Youth Justice Plan sets out our plan for this year in terms of delivering youth justice services across Neath and Talbot, and also will give an overview of our performance from last year. So there's lots of different programmes in there if you've had a chance to read it, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you there. The only questions, well, it's more of an observation really. It was about on one of the projects, because in fairness, it's a very, very detailed report. So it took a bit of time to read it. But I've seen about the hairdressing, and I know you had a bit more funding for the hairdressing, but for young girls, I think that's always a very sort of, one that they quite drawn to. So again, I'm glad you've had the extra funding for that, and I was a bit disappointed to read that you had a lack of funding for it, compared, but all the other activities then are good. The other one was, is there any more information you can give us on, obviously, reducing the permanent exclusions and any of the connections? Like you have mentioned about the neurodiverse for young people in there, but I would be interested, and obviously even if it's shared outside the meeting to us, is any of the stats of children in the service that are connected with the neurodiverse condition? Because again, when you look over and we cross into the education, it seems to be on the rise now as well, and it's also coming up in more and more papers. And we go back on the neurodiverse agenda since I obviously come in, and we have done as a local authority some really great work, and we've got a lot more support, but I think there's also a lot more we can do on that that agenda also. So is there any other things? I don't want to put you on the spot,
fine. Back to about the length of the report. So the report is very lengthy, but that is the Youth Justice's specific structure of the report. So we have to cover all of those different aspects every year. In relation to the hairdressing, yes, we have fortunately had some additional funding, and recently we've had some positive news that the turnaround funding will continue for another year. So we'll be able to continue with the hairdressing, and we are now exploring barbering, so we can have that option then for males if they would like to experience that as well. So we'll utilise the room in base 15 for barbering. And in terms of education, I think as a youth management board, we are looking at exclusions, reducing exclusions, young people on reduced timetables. So we are currently undertaking a speech and language pilot in 2 schools across Neath and Talbot. Obviously, that's not going to resolve an issue overnight, but it's a start. And we're also looking to engage our staff within schools to do specific group work with young people within schools, those that are identified as being at risk of exclusion. And we're also currently doing an audit looking at how we can get support into families earlier, so more preventative intervention. So if a young person's been excluded once, can we get involved at that point rather than let those exclusions build up? So they got days and days and days and more permanent exclusions then. So hopefully that, as well as working with our colleagues in education, we will start to see an improvement.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As the Chair of the Management Board, just wanted to confirm that we are particularly concerned about the number of young people who are involved with exclusions, who also have issues with youth justice. And so, as we said, I've asked for a report to come back to the next board alongside a deep dive analysis of the children, as I say, with youth justice and exclusion. So we can bring something back to this board if you particularly want us to concentrate on that in the future.
Yeah, that would be really good. And I see no further questions. Any questions of any members? No. Go on.
Yeah, just coming back to the exclusion issue as well. Are you looking at things like managed moves as well as in that data? Because I know some schools are managing to move their children onto other schools when technically they'd be excluded.
No, we haven't looked at managed moves at the moment. There's so those children are permanent exclusions, fixed term exclusions, and reduced timetables, and that's quite a substantial number. So we haven't looked at.
Right. You obviously know about managed moves. Can you just explain to the members what that is?
It's basically when they say to the child and the parents, if you go to another school, we won't exclude you, and they manage them onto another school.
Aside from schools suggesting that children are educated at home, so we're not looking at that either. But perhaps that's something.
And if I come in there as head of children's services, that is a big concern for me in relation to the way we're counting things, if you like. So children, we have, you know how much work we do with families, and we've Ruth's area of the service has done a lot of work with families where they're telling us that they've felt under pressure to homeschool youngsters rather than being perhaps fined and not being able to, and not having it on your record then that you've been perhaps excluded from school. But that is something that we are working now with the education department on.
Right. When we come into the, and I know we're not in education now, we are in obviously social services, but I actually thought that no one could advise parents to homeschool. There's a bit of a line there you don't cross.
Yeah.
But it seems to be there was an issue going back from some schools, and that was a couple of years ago. So to actually hear this now, and obviously hearings, which I wasn't aware of, that is, so I think we'll do a deep dive into this, to be honest. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So at your request, we can extend the scope of the work that I've asked as the Chair of the Management Board to include those areas. And as I say, then we can come back and feedback to this committee. We may also want to feedback to Education Committee as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Any other questions now from members? No. Just bear with me, everyone. Are you going to read out it?
Just let members know that there's been a slight change to the recommendation that's in the Cabinet report to the one that was in our draft Cabinet report in the Scrutiny pack. So if members will bear with me, I'll just read out that slightly amended recommendation before we go to the vote. Ruth, if you're happy for me to just read that out. So the recommendation is that it is recommended that members endorse and commend the Youth Justice Plan 24-25 to Council. So I'll just hand back to the Chair.
Okay, so as you all have heard, Pam has just read out the recommendation. So I will propose, can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second.
Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
Chair, I can see no indication to the contrary, so this recommendation is supported to Cabinet.
Agenda item 5, to consider items from the Scrutiny Forward Work Programme. So we go on to agenda item 5. 5A. This obviously was a link on our iPads. So we will go into the Western Bay Area Planning Board. Members, Oliver, was it you who had a question here? Right there. That's me.
I withdrew it in pre-brief, Charlotte, because it was quite an extensive report. But reading the report again after I'd made it, the answer was already in the
That's it,
report.
he said. Yeah, sorry, Oliver, I can remember now what you just said in briefing. But again, if we want to go into a brief on it.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. If we could spend a bit of time on
Yeah.
this, Chair, just
Yeah.
so that members understand the importance of the Area Planning Board.
Yep.
I'll hand over to Shalay to introduce this and the team.
Thank you. So the Area Planning Board is a regional collaboration of a range of statutory bodies, and that includes Swansea Bay Health Board, Swansea Council, Neath Talbot Council, Probation Services and the Police and Crime Commissioner. So they're part of the APB. And the report that we've provided today sets out activities and achievements of the Area Planning Board in the 2023-24 financial year, alongside some areas that the Area Planning Board have agreed that they need to focus on in order to improve the experiences of those that need these types of services. We also, within this, have a number of performance indicators, and 2023-2024 was a year in which we began a significant programme of transformation. So when looking at some of these performance indicators, I'd just like to note that we have seen an improvement in a number of areas this year, and we anticipate further improvements as the Area Planning Board continues to drive forward its transformation agenda. So I hope that gives members some reassurance that we're taking these matters very seriously and are working very hard as a collaborative to improve services and outcomes for people. Also, some performance indicators within the report have a wider story behind them, and it's really important for us to know and understand that wider picture in order for us to make sure that our responses keep up with people's changing needs. One example of this is a reduction in activity for needle and syringe programmes within Neath Talbot. So I've asked Matthew Rafferty, who is our harm reduction lead, to pick up on that and just explain why we think that we've had a reduction in activity there. And I've also asked him to give a brief description around some of the work that we're doing as a region in respect of preventing drug-related deaths, reducing the number of drug-related deaths we have in the region, because that's a key focus for the Area Planning Board. But first, I would just like to hand over to Julia, who's going to just give a brief overview of some of the successes that we've outlined in the report and also some areas of work that we've been progressing this year. So Julia, thank you.
Thank you, sorry. Down, is that better? Okay, thank you. Yeah. So I'm Julia Jenkins, Principal Officer, Substance Use. So I look after the Area Planning Board and the support team that is based within the council, but looks after the regional programme. As you can see, the report outlines the work of the Area Planning Board. It is an Area Planning Board report, and members were pleased to pick up this format of reporting after it hadn't happened for 2 years after COVID. So this is the first report we've done for a long while. I'd just like to highlight a few achievements from the report, and then maybe go into a few things that we're still working on and our key priorities going forward. So, so the first area I'd like to talk about is the work we did to put in mechanisms to review suspected drug-related deaths. So obviously learning from practice is a very important part of our work. So we've established an independent review panel that will review the suspected deaths that are picked up by our case review coordinator. This is a multi-agency panel. It has lots of representation on there from a wide variety of organisations, including mental health. There's a GP on there to give clinical input. We've got criminal justice input and some partners from the APB also. So we review the deaths in line with Welsh Government guidance. All APBs are required to do it. And we've been really successful in being put forward as sort of a gold standard provider of this kind of service across all the APB areas. We review them in a timely way. We review 99% of cases within the 6 months. And we've picked up a lot of recommendations to take forward to improve practice, and also to learn from best practice to disseminate that and lessons learned. We've put in lots of recommendations to service providers, which they've accepted, and we've seen a lot of changes around multi-agency working, so working together more, because as current services are configured, there's lots of different services under one umbrella. We're working to change that, but that's what we've got at present. So we're trying to make people come together around a case and work collaboratively so they can make sure people don't slip between the net. And we've also made a recommendation which has made a lot of difference around discharge process. So when someone comes out of treatment, they may fall out of treatment, that the services come around that person and make sure the risk is eliminated by looking at leaving no stone unturned, really, and looking at all provision, really, that they can be referred to. So those are some important things. We've also set up the learning from practice. So looking at sad death cases is important, but, you know, we're working with current cases. So we have set up a desktop audit where professionals can refer in when they feel maybe they want to look at pathways differently, and we audit those cases and again make recommendations, and that's made a big change to continuous improvement, really. And also I'd like to just highlight in the report, you will see towards the end of the report, there's some information there about service user engagement and involvement. So we have been lucky to have a permanent member of staff within the team now who is a service user engagement officer who works with people with lived and living experience. She set up a forum called Leath, so that's Lived Experience Alliance Forum, and that's been running throughout this year, really, and has continuous membership. And people who use services are just saying it's nice to be part of something and think about things other than their recovery, give them a purpose. So they've been heavily involved in developing the new services, the Alliance co-production. We've got the meetings that set up and they run monthly and they're well attended. And we've also got the peer-to-peer network where people are going out and delivering harm reduction interventions like naloxone and needle exchange within their communities to their peers. They're also been carrying out training to professionals on naloxone, which has been really successful. And just briefly then, touching on a few things that we are still working on. You'll notice in the report that there's quite a wealth of data, and we've got indicators, and we've been able to be more sophisticated in what we're looking at because we have a data analyst now on board, and he's developed a suite of dashboards. So that's helping us to pick up trends, look at gaps, issues, and really develop services based on the information we've got. So that's just a flavour, really, of what we're concentrating on, and moving this year into our new commission service is a challenge, and we are still working with providers who are currently delivering during a time when there's a live tender and contracts are coming to an end, but they're still receptive to change, and we are continuing to do that. So those are the the things I'd just like to mention to members that we're working on. And I think, as Shelley mentioned, I think it would be beneficial for Matthew to just highlight a bit about the harm reduction element of the work we do, which is really important. Thank you.
So I'm Matthew Rafferty, Harm Reduction Lead for Western Bay Area Planning Board. So in terms of harm reduction interventions across the region, we specifically look at 3 target areas. So needle and syringe programme, naloxone provision or take-home naloxone distribution, and bloodborne virus screening. Just like to kind of point out around the needle and syringe programme start. So across Western Bay, a decrease in activity has been observed year to date at time of writing. There's a total percentile decrease of 17% in total transactions, with only a 3% decline in unique individuals accessing the provision across the region. Data may change by financial year to end because we've got 2 weeks left of till the end of March. When we compare engagement levels to pre-COVID, there's notable decreases in levels of engagement within the needle and syringe programme, but associated harms such as increased hepatitis C transmission and increases in severe infections through injecting drug uses have not been seen. Thus gives us an evidence base that perhaps the needle exchange decrease is a change in drug use patterns, which I'll explain a little bit later on. So the decline in NSP activity can be attributed to several factors, of which here are some examples that we believe are the main contributors. So shifts in drug use patterns since the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, services have reported significant increases in crack cocaine presentations, a drug or substance typically smoked rather than injected. Also, there's evidence suggests that less people now engage in injecting practices as a primary route of taking substances as well. So the second explanation would be an introduction and expansion of Buvidal provision across the region. Buvidal was introduced during the pandemic as a long-acting... Oh, sorry. So Buvidal is a long-acting buprenorphine. So people typically wouldn't kind of, if they injected heroin on top. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to ask what that question was, because there was a one just for that, wasn't it? So I didn't have time to Google it. So if you can explain what that is.
So Buvidal is a long-acting buprenorphine. So it's a form of opiate substitute treatment. So essentially what buprenorphine, to simplify it, it's a blocker. So if someone was to use heroin on top of a Buvidal script, it'd be ineffective. It wouldn't act within the opiate receptors. So they wouldn't have that desired high or that desired effect. So essentially it's a blocker of heroin. Thus, then when people try to inject heroin, has no effect. So we would say the changes in drug taking behavior then, so people wouldn't access needle and syringe program. Does that make sense? Answer? Yeah. So the decrease in unique individuals engaged in needle and syringe programs should be considered with Buvidal. We have cross-referenced Buvidal figures and people on Buvidal prescriptions, and it does tie in quite nicely. What we have found is Devodol as a service would double count in Buvidal figures, so it's hard to disaggregate and pinpoint the decrease in unique individuals versus people in Buvidal, but those numbers do marry up quite nicely, so I'm quite content that that's one factor. Also, we've got alternative sourcing of injecting equipment by individuals using image and performance enhancing drugs, or IPEDs, in the health sector. So IPEDs are steroids, so anabolic steroids and peptides. The common drugs used for these. Many of these individuals are sourcing their injecting equipment from online vendors or from their suppliers of iPads as well. So we've seen from the pandemic, those individuals are not engaging with our services, but it is an area that we are looking to focus engagement with Public Health Wales as well. It's worth noting as well that consistent decreases in NSP activity have been observed nationally, so it's nothing unique to Neath or Talbot, and we're not backing any trends locally either. So it's kind of the picture that's seen across our partner APBs and other areas in Wales. In terms of naloxone, so those who are unaware, naloxone is a medicine used to reverse opiate overdoses. So essentially that will knock off the opiate off the receptor in the brain and allow someone to breathe for a period of time, so an ambulance could...
If I can just come in there now, because they're long words and I won't be able to go back to them.
Yeah.
But is that the one that police officers carry as well?
That's it.
I'm getting good now.
Yeah. That's it. So
if you can just explain to members also, when obviously, and the reason why they do obviously carry it as well, and who else carries it, because some of the support workers carry it as well, doesn't they?
That's it. So naloxone's, like I said, a medicine to reverse an opiate overdose. We provide it in 2 separate forms. So it comes in a nasal form and an injectable form. Many of the professionals that we train and we allow people to carry naloxone, such as police, they opt to carry the nasal kits due to policy and legislation. Internally allows them for quicker kind of turnaround. So essentially the nasal allows us to bypass a lot of internal policies. Obviously within injectable forms, we have to go through policies such as carrying sharps within the workplace, etc. So that's naloxone as a medication. If I'll give an overview as well about where we are at the minute. So there's been a slight decrease in naloxone provision across the region, but it's something we've expected due to the fact we saturated the naloxone market. I say market, the naloxone. I wouldn't say market because that's what the term I use. So we've saturated naloxone supply across the region during 2022, 23, and then into 2024. And that's reflected in national reports where Neath, Talbot, Swansea, and Western Bay are the top performing naloxone distributors in Wales as well. So, and there is clear evidence to show that's the injectable one.
Members, you're missing out on the chamber. You should have come in because we've actually got a sample here. So if we just raise it up now, because the camera will come on you with your mic on.
Yeah, so here we go. And Howard kindly produced this from her handbag because she carries it. It's an example of a naloxone kit that can be carried by people who use services, their family, friends, and professionals. That's what it looks like.
And going back to the decline in supply events, again, we knew it was going to be expected. The life of the kits are, I think it's 3 years for the Prenoxad, which is the injectables, and then it's 2 years for the nasals, or the other way around. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we would expect that 2-year saturation, and then we'll revisit that in 2 years' time. Changes in legislation, though, are going to allow us to distribute further and wider to sectors such as housing and homelessness services. So those services will be able to distribute naloxone under the new policies as set out by the government.
Right, if I just come in with that as well. Do you know, obviously now there's in communities, we've got obviously defibs and things like that. Do you see it as being, you know, like obviously someone overdoses, that someone in the community could run and get something, or is it something you have to be trained in? Like a defib will train you obviously as it goes. But it sounds quite simple really if it's the nostril or something. So again, what do they call? They're called the bleed banks now as well. They're out now as well. Bleed kits are out now as well in communities. So obviously some areas like I think in my own community, I think I got more dealers than users, to be honest. So, you know, would it be something that would come into wards eventually?
So we've got, so I've been looking at that as a research pilot, so naboxones they're called. So they're similar to the defib containers, but we did look and explore putting the naloxone kits in the defib containers. It would be really tricky because obviously the circuits are on a national circuit with defib containers, so it would take a specific, it's a huge piece of work to try and get WAST to include naloxone in specific areas. So what we're looking at is naboxones to go next to the defib containers, or an initial pilot to go on the side of our commission services. So we are looking at that. Unfortunately, financial constraints, as we know, are a big issue. So any underspends we get, that's something I could definitely look at. It's been done in Gwent, and I've got all the research documents together off the ground.
So how much are they?
Top of my head, we're looking about £10,000.
How many?
That'll be 2 or 3. Top of my head. And this is because obviously we've got to set up a texting framework, so these would go onto a wall. Someone would text the code to get the naloxone kits, and then that would generate a code then to open that box. But to kind of answer your question about having naloxone supply from other areas, we are looking, so with real-time surveillance from case reviews and non-fatal overdoses, we know where hotspot areas are. So we know there's a number of hostels that are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are trained at Emma O'Brien's on the call. So a lot of the reported harm seen in the Ambassador and within housing sectors, we get those trained, so staff are carrying naloxone around the clock, so we know staff members have got those kits to hand when needed. To give you an example, in Swansea, the city centre rangers is a bit of a different demographic, but the city centre rangers, they've got naloxone kits, so they see a lot more public overdoses. So we're quite content that we've got enough kits there for people. The difficulty is when we give someone who's at risk of an overdose a kit, quite often that person, if they overdose, they can't administer themselves. So it's trying to change the theme and anecdotes of going, you might not need it, but if your friend goes over, you can grab a kit. And also changing the perception, the stigma to professionals looking in as well. Yeah, that's it for naloxone. Any questions on naloxone? No. So bloodborne virus screening, really quickly. Year to date, we've seen a 22% decrease, but again, it's as a result of our positive work. We're the only area in Wales to have services achieving micro-elimination. So bloodborne virus, are viruses that are transmitted through blood-to-blood contact, and unfortunately people who inject drugs are top of that risk register in terms of transmission of hepatitis B, hepatitis C and HIV. We have a harm reduction framework that embeds bloodborne virus screening as part of routine interventions. And we're supported there with the Swansea Bay University Health Board BBV clinical team. So the services that are achieving microeliminations. So back last year, Frank Atherton released a Welsh health circular looking to kind of put onus on area planning boards and health boards to achieve microelimination of hepatitis C in line with the World Health Organization objectives. We are the only services, we have the only services in Wales achieving this. So we have PSALT, the Rapid Access Prescribing Service, Dyfodol, and the CDAT, Community Drug and Alcohol team from Swansea Bay Health Board, all achieving this. So it's really positive, and it's with thanks to the BBV support team for that as well. Any questions on BBVs? No. It's a nice straightforward one. Just like to finish up then on drug-related death figures, or drug misuse deaths as per ONS definition. So first and foremost, data, the data we present, we have to be considerate that every piece of data is a person and a tragic loss in our communities, and something that we are committed to reducing. So at time of writing, potential drug misuse deaths, we're showing a 23% decrease in Neath Port Talbot. Things could change overnight, and things could change such as the coronial delays that we are seeing across Wales. And also we are presenting data in the Area Planning Board report and a financial year, where ONS will present on a calendar year. So some deaths could fall into different years, if that makes sense. So as I said, we've seen a 23% decrease across Neath Port Talbot this year to date, but in 2023 and 2024 we saw a 30% increase. So the ONS report, that's due to be published retrospectively next year. We'd expect to see that increase, but the Area Planning Board are fully aware of these figures, and we've made substantial changes already, as Julia has alluded to. So Neath Port Talbot's equated to 18% of the cases as well. And that's been consistent throughout the past 4 years. The only time we've ever exceeded 20% was in 23-24, again, where we saw a 30% increase. So when we look at the review cases as well, there's no thematics to show we're going to see a spike in Q1, Q2, Q3, or Q4. In the previous 4 years, we have seen spikes, or the highest rates, in different months. So there's never a pinpoint. So we can never say in summer we're going to see high related cases, or typically people think it's going to happen around Christmas, where we focus Overdose Awareness Day around December. So our main cause of concern still remains polydrug use, with opioids, prescription-only medication, benzodiazepines and stimulants the most recorded substances in toxicology. That's come back to us. This is consistent again with findings in previous years, and also findings from partner APBs. They are seeing the similar sort of patterns as well. Demographics indicate that the median age range is 35 to 54, consistent with the national picture as well, and males are equating to approximately 3/4 of cases and females 1/4. Again, consistent with other areas in Wales, and the recent publication from ONS and Public Health Wales is backing that evidence as well. So emerging threats and concerns within the drug markets, nitazines, which is a potent synthetic opioid. So for ease of access or ease of listening, synthetic just means chemically made. So nitazines is a chemically made opiate that mimics the effects of heroin, or kind of gives effects as heroin. The group of potent synthetic opioids, though, can be far stronger than heroin dose. There's evidence to suggest these drugs are being found in tablets as well, being missold as benzodiazepines, and recently being found in powdered drugs such as ketamine as well. Behind nitazines, we have the emerging threat of xylazine, which is a non-opioid synthetic analgesic. So it's an analgesic as a drug, tongue twister. And it's become an emerging threat due to the fact it has a severe impact on the central nervous system. So these drugs are being added into the heroin supply. We believe that is down to the decrease seen in Afghanistan with the opium poppy. So we are seeing heroin markets slowly decrease. But on the back of that, we understand from our colleagues in policing that opium is back where it should be, although slightly more expensive. So we would expect these drugs to slowly dwindle off. But such is our local drug information system, that we've got a robust system to monitor these cases and these drug markets.
So again, you just mentioned now about obviously it dwindling off, but then if that dwindles off because it's become more expensive, do you think then that we'll have like, obviously the crime rate will obviously rise as a result of that?
It's hard. That would be my colleagues in policing to answer
Yeah.
that. They have the data. So yeah, it's a difficult one to answer. So
Yeah.
But again, it's with drug markets, it's predicting.
Generally, it's like, if in history, you know, is that's like the pattern is like they obviously go out to steal and sell goods to obviously for their habit. So again, would that, I think
Yeah, I mean,
probably
it's a hard. We wouldn't be
it's a
able
hard
to,
one.
We aren't.
to say,
We're
but
not
again,
in a position.
it's like when we look at them, that's a good news story there. That it's obviously coming down, but then on the other hand, then it could be the fact of, with theft and things like that. Then on the other side of community safety, that can rise up. So it's one up, one down, really, innit? Yeah.
I come in on that one. So in the police custody suites, when someone's arrested, they'll be potentially drug tested, and that's also matched across to the typology of offending. So we will be able to monitor what offences are happening and what substance the person has potentially used. And there are supports in police custody suites to assess and triage people in relation to their drug or alcohol use as well. So we do have the ability to look at how offending and drug markets are influencing behaviours in the population. So yeah, I'll stop there.
And that was it then. That was it.
Well done.
Yes, thank you.
If I can just go from obviously like with members, when you live and breathe it every day in work, and that's what, again, when we read in papers, sometimes it's a bit more difficult because we're trying to Google and understand and all of that. So again, I always go into reading the papers if I was going to refer someone, or how do they get referred, or we'd ask questions and things like that to understand a bit more about it. What I've seen with this papers and over Boothview is that it just seemed as if, and I know it was pointed out as well, and obviously work in progress and that, but it just seems as if there was just like a massive, all different people doing different things. And it was like, when you give us the stat table, it was, is one person in a number of them services, or is it just in one specific service? Things like that. So again, it was like, if it was all in one place, easy access, where's the first point of referral? What was the other questions I've had? I'll ask for all them because I know you've had the questions. You can just there. So if you just answer all the questions I sent you earlier.
Yeah, no worries.
Then,
so in relation to the makeup of services, we do acknowledge that we have inherited a legacy of historic services before the APB came into place. So you had Swansea Services, you had Neath, Talbot, and they were just merged at the time of APBs. We've been working for a long time to recommission services. That is happening now. The live tender is out. We should have a new service commissioned by the end of this year. That will mean one service where everybody comes in, whether they're from criminal justice or in the community, one entry point in, and then one provider of clinical and one provider of non-clinical. So everything will be within one. Yes, but we do have a first point of contact in current services though. So that is a free phone number. Anybody can ring it. They can drop in to Adfeiriad in Neath, Talbot, Barod in Swansea, who run the service. They can go online. There's a referral form on the Neath website. So we have tried to improve access to one point. So that has been streamlined. And during this year, when I've been saying we've been working to improve services, one of them is we have a weekly meeting now. When people are referred in, there's a weekly meeting, a multi-agency, and those cases are allocated there and then. And only on Monday, I heard from a service user who reported back to say that he couldn't believe he had a phone call the next day and was into service. So things are working. We have tried to ease into access. So hopefully that is beneficial. Professionals can refer in or self-referral as well, the same number, the same way. So that's into Neath. So I hope that answers your question on that.
There's that one.
Right, okay. You also asked about residential rehab in the report. So it was mentioned that people had withdrawn their applications.
No, it actually states on there that if they're going to go into rehab, if they deteriorate, then basically it didn't, and that didn't make sense to me. Because if you deteriorate, I thought you need more to be in rehab.
Yeah, I think so the report refers to during the application process, if a person's health deteriorates, they may not be suitable then to go into a 16-week rehab placement. So during that process, if their health condition deteriorates, not just their substance use or their mental health, that is taken into consideration before someone commences on a 16-week residential rehab, because it won't be, they'd be setting them up to fall basically. So that's why those 7 people in the report are referred to, because it didn't happen for whatever reason. But that process is open-ended. So if it didn't happen, then they're welcome to come back round, you know, because it's a cycle recovery. So your people sometimes have several placements over a long period of time. So that you know, that we work with people on that. So I hope that answers that question.
Let me just check, is there any others? No, there's oh, Alan Llewellyn, yeah. Alan, you got a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's not so much a question as a comment. I don't know if you've reached the end of members' questions. I just wanted to make a
No,
general
not yet.
comment.
Do you want me to bring you in at the end then?
Yeah,
Yeah.
is that okay? It's just a
Yeah,
general
no
comment
problem.
about the work of the team and the presentation. Thanks.
The other one was, it was really concerning to see the difference with the deaths of males compared to females also. And again, is there any other further work being done in that now that we know? Because that just really jumps out at us, isn't it? And it was also quite concerning to see that we are higher in Neath Talbot, the stats there for deaths. That was a bit concerning as well. So again, is there any links to any thing there that obviously has come to light as well? And my final question was, I'd like to see stats on any like drug users, which is connected to people with neurodiverse conditions as well.
Yeah, if I pick up on the female death rates, so again, we're not bucking any national trends. So in the recent ONS report, nationally across Wales, the female to male ratio was 68% males, 32% females. This year, in our 2024-25 stats, we're at 80-20, so 80% males, 20% females. So we've seen a reduction in females actually. Then 2023 we saw 69-31, and then 2022-23 we saw 69%, 31% again in the female to male split, the male to female split. So again, it's not concerning because we're seeing that across Wales. Generically, we kind of always say there's more males who take drugs than females, and also there's other factors such as females are less likely to come forward for support. But we did do a piece of work last year, and it was linked to the increase in females, particularly in the Swansea area. So a suite of recommendations were implemented within the harm reduction subgroup. One of those were looking at gender-specific support, so female-only groups, female-only appointments, and services have adopted those recommendations. So I can share that report and the findings from that. But we have done a piece of work on females in that, and it's built in within Harrod's workstream as well. Not built in, it's within Harrod's workstream.
Yeah, did you want me to come in? Yeah, I think it's a really important point that you've raised about the experience of women. And what we're challenging providers to do is to really think about how we can engage women into services and provide them with specific gender approaches. So I think, like Matt has said, we're still working with providers to do that, and think about, you know, what is it that we need to do to ensure that women are accessing our services and getting the right support that they need. And just to pick up the point about neurodiversity as well, currently we're really limited in terms of data. It's not recorded on our systems, and I think that is a really fundamental point that we need to address within our new services, so that we're really capturing, you know, our demographics, and we understand how to respond. So yeah, I think it's a really key point for us to take forward.
Because a lot of research now over the, you know, in all different countries as well, is the connection of drug use and being neurodiverse as well in the justice system as well. It's also there in our schools, and we've been on this journey and seen it grow, and all the different connections as well. So I think that, but again, I was really pleased to hear about the data, that you're collecting the data on the platform. That's amazing, because it does tell you a story. And I think across you brought in data some time ago now, a couple of years, and I know Chris Ray absolutely loves it. You get really excited about it, don't you, Chris? So it's that's always a warm welcome here. But now I can't see anyone else. So Alan, if you want to come in now.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I was trying to put my microphone back on. Yeah, no, look, I'd just like to thank all of the team for their contribution this afternoon, and and for the questions. This is a really complex field that most of our residents may not know the level of involvement of the council and our community safety teams and substance use teams in this work that is trying so hard to protect people from the effects of the harmful effects of substance use. And I've recently, as well as my cabinet role, I've recently been representing the authority on the Drugs Commission. And although I've had quite a lot of both voluntary and professional experience in the past in terms of working in supported housing and so on, with people that are going through these experiences, I've learned so much about the complexity of the situation. There are harmful substances out there now that we didn't even know existed a very short time ago. So tackling these issues is increasingly complex and increasingly difficult. And I'd like to thank Julian and Harald and Matthew and Shelley and colleagues for the contribution they've made. They really have made a tremendous contribution to the work of the APB and in changing the way that the APB is actually working and responding to these challenges, and particularly in the development, in recent months of the alliance model, which hopefully will much better coordinate the services across all agencies. So I think I'd like to know in a way how we can better publicise the role that we play as a local authority, because this isn't known, in comparison with visible frontline services and so on in people's communities, but it's such an essential part of keeping communities safe. So I think it's something I think we all need to sort of consider how we can share information about how valuable this role really is. But I'd just like to thank yourself, Chair, for requesting this report to come to scrutiny, and to the team for the presentations that they made this afternoon.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I thought it was an excellent report, and I only read it yesterday, and I did get really engrossed in it, to be honest. And I think it is one that we would like to look at and have a regular update going forward as well, and see how you progress as well going forward, especially in the stats data. Right. So there are no more questions on that. Oh, with that, Heath?
Yes, you almost forgot about me then.
I know I did. How can I forget about you? Your first meeting. Everyone welcome Heath. This is his first meeting with us.
Right, thank you very much, Diolch yn fawr. I'd like to say a couple of things, really. I've been involved, I was working at one time in Morrison Hospital, A&E and what's what, and my experience here in Swansea University. And I've asked many of the students, why do you want drugs and what's what, that's male and female, because it's cheaper than alcohol, and they get a buzz. And I've also seen then, obviously, in A&E, them coming in and stretchers and what's what, a mess. And I've had a chat with quite a few social workers over a couple of years. What is the solution? And they said there is no ideal solution. And this is just hard because the drugs now is everywhere now. You can smell it. It's everywhere. And so what is the solution? Do we kill it at the root, the sellers, and provide the drugs? And, that is the problem. And for them to say it's cheaper than alcohol, so they go into the drugs themselves. So that's all I want to say, really.
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to come back in on that?
I'd just like to comment, really. I think you're quite right. It's a really challenging area, and I think you can see just from the things that we've talked about today, it's a a multiple pronged approach we need to take. So there's, naloxone provision, there's peer-to-peer development, there's about how our services operate to make sure that we're catching people at the right time in the right place. There's also advertising our services, making sure people know about them. But I think there's really an important part of this work is around working with public health and thinking about how we kind of change the narrative around substance use and how we can kind of change those behaviours in the population. So I think you're right. It's a real challenge, but I think it's really important we just work in partnership and take a real evidence-based approach at what's effective, and keep a focus together on it.
Great. It's intrigued me that much that I like to go out on visits, and I try to encourage other members to go out on visits as well now. I think it is totally different from reading a paper. So again, we'd be asking to do visits to some of the providers if possible. It would be nice also to meet some users who might be confident, and again, more good news stories, because we always hear the bad sometimes, whereas I think the good stories, is really good, and then use them for inspirational then, do you know what I mean, for others. So again, I leave that with Pamela and obviously Shelley, and that go forward. So thank you for that. It was really, really good. I'm looking at you, Andrew, and it's obviously over to me, and I see I got so carried away. I enjoyed it, and I just don't know where I am now. Hold on. Next one. So again, this was just for reporting. So I'm going to go straight into agenda item 5B. This report is also for information only, and it's the best report I've ever read, Angela. Not taken away from yours now today, right? But it was only 2 pages. So it was absolutely phenomenal. So if over to you now, Angela.
I'll be equally brief. This report provides an update on Adult Services Single Point of Contact, which we call SPOC. This report was requested by the Scrutiny Committee some time ago, and I'm pleased to say that since that time there's been some exciting, significant developments about how we deliver the service, which are contained in the report. Sitting alongside me today is Sorrel Jones, who, along with a number of other services, is responsible for SPOC, and we're happy to take any questions, Chair.
I think the only questions were from me again, sorry. But if you can just give us, it was really good to see, because the last meeting Spock came to us was down to the time waiting. And the time waiting, I think, at the time it went to about 5 minutes. Then I did a mystery shopper, and I was there for about 13 minutes. So looking at these now, and the average times is breath of fresh air, really. Can you give the members any sort of examples of the type of calls that obviously come in? Because there was a lot of in the stats, there's a lot obviously signposted out now rather than going into the services. So that what sort of captured my interest was that I think it was about 70% goes out, so they're not coming into the service, but it was them questions. So again, we've had training today on the AI, and I can't remember the rest of them, the co-pilot, and what was the other one? Magic Notes, that's it, Magic Notes. So again, it would be interesting, especially on the my Neath for Talbot as well, them 70% of signposting, could that be embedded more into that type of system, maybe than the calls, like when on that platform, something on there for us, maybe, I don't know, but I think we would like to know a bit more about the Magic Notes, if possible.
Yeah.
And a visit. We've got to have a visit.
That's fine. So in terms of the types of referrals that come into the team, they vary across the board, really. So we may have police reports that come in that could be domestic violence. Individuals maybe contacting us for aids and adaptations if they need equipment at home. Sometimes we have referrals around self-neglect issues, hoarding. There's quite a variety of referrals that come into the system, and the approaches to those then, what the team do is they have a discussion within the team to look at what's the best course of action to move forward. So whether that would be an assessment within the team or to signpost for information to other services or to make those referrals on to other services, whether that's within our sort of remit or outside of that. Really, there could be preventative services or maybe external services such as drug and alcohol services and so on. So it's quite a variety of referrals that come into the team. In terms of the magic note system, this has been quite a game changer for the team in being able to respond even quicker to referrals that we do receive. So what we're finding is that staff are able to take this out with them on their tablet devices, mobiles, laptops, however that will be, and providing that individuals have consented to using that, because obviously they do need to consent to that. We're finding a significant reduction in the amount of time taken for social workers to complete their reports. Now, we're hoping to take that a little bit further, really, because what we have now is obviously the team will undertake a proportionate assessment of somebody's needs, and where then there's longer term intervention required or potentially more in-depth assessment that's not able to be undertaken at the front door due to time restraints, they will then pass to our network social workers. So what we're hoping to achieve from the use of this technology is for the front door to be able to do more enhanced assessments at the front door to prevent that further delays in the system, so that people can get access to the services they need even quicker, really, than what they were before. So we've got quite high expectations for where we see this going and what we want, where we want to support people further. So yes, sorry, what was the other part of the questions? Have I answered that?
You've answered everything I wanted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can we just add, there is a degree of enthusiasm across adult services with this. I think we piloted in the front door and now it's rolling out to pace. So we actually seconded somebody from our front door to roll this out across the whole of adult services by the end of the year. So we can bring subsequent reports back to see how this is.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to ask, because in the seminar today now, the full focus, and praise to yourself, Andrew, for being a main supporter of this through the services. And so again, that would be good to see how effective that is, because obviously they were saying there was a cost to it and everything else. So if it's having that much of a big cost going forward, then it's obviously something that, you know, going forward, more money could maybe put towards that or something as well to make it faster and effective. So yeah, that was really good as well. See, I'm learning so much today, and all everyone else says XCM. Yes, that's it.
Questions?
Right, so no, there's no further questions, there's no hands up. No, so again, this is another report for noting. Going to go straight down to agenda item 6, and we're going now to move to consider the performance monitoring reports for the Forward Work Programme. Agenda 6A is, and again, this report is also for noting, which is the West Glamorgan Safeguarding. Again, another big document. Is it? It is this one.
Yeah, happy to take this one. It's a large document, but I think from reading it, hopefully you will read and have heard today. It's a large and growing area as well. So the report covers 2022, 23, or is it 23, 24? And it covers over the function of the board, which is primarily responsible for coordinating the safeguarding response to children and adults across the region, and that's coordinating agency and organisation responses as well. So the report sets out those kind of agencies and members of the board, and then covers over the setup structure of the board and how as a board then we get feedback from various organisations to be assured that safeguarding is a priority and continues to be kind of developing in this ever evolving, growing area. Happy to stop there and take any questions, Chair.
Any questions on this? Wasn't it? No, it's the next one. Yeah, no, because again, 196 pages, I think, in detail. It was all there. Thanks for that, Chris. So again, now that again was for noting. So I'll go straight on to agenda item 6B. This is the Neath Talbot safeguarding report. because there's another word in there that I thought I'm not going to say that one.
Again, oh, sorry.
Go on.
Yeah, again, another lengthy report, hopefully highlighting the significant efforts that are undertaken across children's services, adult safe services, and the other directorates as well, with the corporate safeguarding element as well, including, of course, the challenges that we face across Neath Talbot over the past 2 years. So this report talks to 2022 to 2024, and I think it really does underscore the resilience and the commitment of the safeguarding teams amidst what are increasing demands and ever-growing complexity. And Matthew and others touched upon some of that complexity in terms of substance use. The report covers over children's services, adult services, corporate safeguarding, that's harm in the home, risks in the home, risks outside of the home, and risks across organisations, institutions as well. So it really is a broad church. Happy to take any questions. I know there are 2 on this report.
Right, I've got a few questions. They're from Councillor Freegard, who can't be here today. However, I'm going to actually message them to you, and obviously you can give me a written response, because by the time I see you, probably I won't remember what you've told me. So I'm going to do that for you and put them in writing to you, if that's okay.
Most grateful.
Yeah. Members, do you have any other questions on this? No. Again, I'm going to go straight into agenda item 6C now. And again, this is for information only. This is the performance monitoring Q3. Director, are you going to come in on this, or I don't know who does this one?
I think the report is quite explanatory, Chair. So as you say, this is the Q3 performance summary for the corporate plan, specifically here to be scrutinised in relation to those functions that this scrutiny committee oversee. So we're happy to take any questions on that. Don't know whether Louise wants to say anything else.
Nothing for me. I'm just here to take any questions on the sort of general formatting of the report or the corporate plan.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think some of the questions that were not on social services. It was more on the education there. So obviously that's not for this committee. There was no other things on that. The only concerns that came up, which is being raised in numerous meetings, is the layout. I think members are preferring the old style of it being given rather than this style. But again, we've obviously discussed that in other meetings with the chairs and scrutiny, I think with Craig. So other than that, I don't see any indications for any other questions on it. So we go straight on. Again, that was for information only. We'll go straight on to agenda item 6D. Social services performance data. Again, is there anything any officer wishes to add?
Yeah, if I may, Chair. So this is the performance report. So if you remember, a number of meetings ago, I came and presented a number of performance criteria that we collect across the directorate. You sent me away and asked me to work with the heads of service on a suite of performance information. Before you have that suite, if there is anything that you need us to add or things which you need explained, then we're happy to take that on board. This is your report as far as the scrutiny is concerned. So we're happy to take any questions on that basis.
No, again, quite straightforward. It's just charts. So they're quite...
Chair, would it be helpful if, because this is the first time that we present in this, would it be helpful if I just ask the heads of service just to go through, put a bit of narrative against each
one? A narrative against the charts, because there is no narratives. It's just...
Happy for us to do that verbally today?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and I can't... Yeah, let me just orientate myself, please, Chair. So the first one is the percentage of people successfully prevented from becoming homeless. So you see the graph there, and Shalay can just introduce that one.
Thank you. So this KPI is really important for us to monitor and look at on a regular basis, because this helps us to track the implementation of some improvement measures that we put in place in order to help increase prevention and better manage demand. So if you remember, we did a restructure in housing options, and and that allowed us to put an enhance our prevention element of our support that we provide people. So it's not on here, but if we track this year's figures against the previous year figures, we can see that this year we've had a notable improvement. The average for the last for the quarters 1, 2, and 3 in the previous financial year was a prevention rate of 53%. As you can see, we've done a lot better this year. So we want to keep looking at these figures to make sure that we are doing everything we can to prevent as many people as possible from becoming homeless. And then the second one is around understanding the demand and pressure for disabled facility grants. So members may remember that we brought a paper a few months ago explaining why there was such a pressure on our DFG budget, and why people were waiting long periods of time to get the aids and adaptations they needed to be done and completed. So within that, we'd also put forward a number of proposals that we felt could help better manage demand. So this is a really important KPI to look at, because as officers make changes and we as a council maybe agree to do things differently in order to improve access to DFGs for those most in need of DFGs, this KPI will be able to see the impact of any decisions we make and any changes to the way we do things.
Can I just ask a question on measure 1, please? So you've expressed this in the percentage of adults successfully prevented from becoming homeless. Are the actual figures up or down?
So Emma, do you have numbers of people? Would you have that to hand?
I don't have it to hand. I can get that, but the figure is based on the number of people that are actually owed a statutory prevention duty, and then those successful cases out of that number. So I can get the number. That's no problem at all. So I don't have it to hand, but would you like any particular periods of time or just the most recent?
Yeah, just sort of. Yeah, the most recent. I wasn't trying to be a gotcha or anything. Just suddenly occurred to me that we could have, double the amount of people coming in, and you've done really well to deal with 78%, if you know what I mean. So I just thought it's a better way of reflecting your success as well, isn't it, by putting the figures?
Yeah, no problem. I can get those and I can send those over.
Okay, Chair, shall I carry on? So I think a couple of things that we've already learned then. So where we're quoting percentages, we know that you like the figures as well alongside those. So we'll try and do that probably in a box underneath for each one. We'll also provide a written prose explaining where we think we've got to on each of the performance information indicators that we're giving you. I think we'll also look at longer trend lines. I think just looking at the last 2 quarters probably is not a good indication of where we are heading, whether there are any difficulties or not. It's difficult for a scrutiny committee to see that. So we'll go back further. So you've got better trend lines. Yeah, at least that. Yeah. With that, if I can carry on and go to indicator 3, which is Angela Thomas's side, which is the number of hours of external domiciliary care, which seems to have risen significantly.
So there's 2 parts. This isn't complete yet. So if I just explain where we're at. So the first one is the number of people we have placed in residential care, nursing care. And as you can see, that's increased by 30 people. And in financial terms, that's an increase of £1.5 million that we haven't budgeted for. So we initially thought X number of people would be in there. That number has risen. Similarly, within domiciliary care, what we do is people come into the in-house service first, we right-size it, then we move it out to the external. So we're victims of our own success. Because we're doing so well in our brokerage system and moving things on, We're moving things on at such a pace, we've let the external market run away with us. What's missing from this report that counters this is our Tremaglin reablement unit. So I've come back to you in the past and said, if we had a period of reablement, would we slow down and prevent people going directly into residential care? And similarly, if we had a period of reablement, would we reduce the amount of reliance on domiciliary care, because you'd either go home with no package or a reduced package? Now, I can tell you about the first part. The second part is likely to be reported nearer September, October time, when Sorel's got this up and running, which is coming back in 1st of April. So it's work in progress. It tells you something in terms of budgeted hours, but it doesn't give you the whole picture and what we're trying to do to counter that until we get Tremaglin up and running.
Just on that is obviously that's going to have a good effect on that. Yeah. So it's the number of beds at Tremaglin. Is that number of beds enough?
We won't. Do you want to answer? Yeah, sorry.
So we've done some analysis in relation to the amount of beds we would need at Tremaglin based off other models in both Swansea and other councils, really. So at the moment, what we've modelled is correct for what we need. So that's something that if we find that our demand is increasing, then we can relook at that. But currently, we do seem to have the right number of beds set for our population.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So we will move on then, if there's no other questions for those, and then we move on to children's services and safeguarding. But in the first instance, the next indicator is the number of looked after children. I'll hand over to Kerry.
You will be sick of hearing about me talking about looked after children. So you'll see that has continued to decline with us only looking after children that need to be looked after. So there's very robust arrangements, as you know, in terms of our early intervention and preventative services. And when youngsters are looked after, they're well supported, and foster carers are supervised, so that those children that can be rehabilitated home are rehabilitated home, with a very pragmatic response for older youngsters, where they will always vote with their feet. So once your youngster gets to perhaps 15, 16, sometimes a bit younger, it's unless there are very significant concerns that would prevent that happening, then we will always continue to engage with families, because we would prefer youngsters to return home on a planned basis than, as I've said, vote with their feet and go back home on an unplanned basis, which leads to poorer outcomes. We're on target. We're on target in terms of the continued reduction this year. And I suppose the only other thing I'd say about that is you've heard us talking about our transformation programme. And just to add, because it's a good news story, that we have been successful in reaching our target in terms of the number of step-down carers we wanted this year for youngsters who are in residential care. And I think anyone that's in any doubt about whether that's a good idea, should come and talk to some of those youngsters and the foster carers that are looking after them. And we will be presenting to you in the next few months those good outcomes for those youngsters, because it really is a good news story. But I'd be happy to answer any other questions in relation to looked after children, Chair.
I don't see any indicators of any questions, to be honest. But I think, to be honest with you, we were talking about obviously there's a lack of narrative here, but if it's going to be extra work, which I think it is, the briefing goes, like you've just done the briefings, now just go with the chart. I personally think that's enough, because it's the visual we're having. And obviously we always do the briefings beforehand. So I personally think that is quite enough, but again, if obviously going further on down the line, we can adapt to going forward. But I'll be advised on you on that, Andrew, to be honest.
I think, Chair, it's a matter for you and the committee. If us presenting to you starts a conversation, then absolutely we'd rather do that.
Yeah. And so I think we leave it from there, unless any other members want to come in with anything. No, his head's shaking. No,
okay, we'll
that's
continue to do that. So yeah. If we move...
And to be honest with you, Andrew, it's less reading for us.
Okay, absolutely, no problem.
Got to think
about conversation,
then we are happy.
So if we move on then to the number of children on the Child Protection Register, I know that the committee were particularly interested in this, and Kerry will comment on this one.
Been increasing on it.
I come in first, and then I know Chris Ray will want to come in after me. I'll just set the scene really. So it's similar. It mirrors the standard of social work, which has led to a reduction in those numbers. We're back sort of 10 years ago, the numbers of children on the Child Protection Register was very high, and we've seen numbers between 200 and 300 children. What that does is it dilutes the impact that social workers and support plans have on families where there needs to be a written child protection plan in respect of a child that is suffering or likely to suffer significant harm. You know, it's not rocket science to say that, you know, when everything is a risk, then nothing is a risk. Nothing can be managed effectively. So I think what we've done is a huge amount of work with our partners, with our conference and review service led by Chris, so that we've done a lot of work on threshold, you know, the definition of significant harm, and moved away from those times when children's names would be included on the Child Protection Register, because that's the way that partners believed that they would receive support from social services. And I understand that. Obviously, we don't agree with that, but it was at a time where partners had lost confidence in us. So I'm delighted to tell you about the work that has continued to go on with partners as well as within our own service, which means now that we have a confident workforce, we have good relationship with partners, and only those children who are, as I said, meeting that criteria, as names are included on that register. So I'll hand over to Chris if he wants to add any more.
I think all I would say to this number is, whilst it is rising, or it appears to be rising from the graph, I think the point Andrew made is important insofar as being able to see the trajectory of the numbers over the past 18 months or more, because what I would say is this is a number that rises and falls, and we would expect it to rise and fall. But more critically, based on the past 18 months and how we kind of monitor this number, the increase would reflect nothing more than common cause variation. So that is all systems have natural variation in them, and there is nothing jumping out to us when we look at and bear down on the data to suggest there is an issue in a particular area of practice. We'll continue to do that in terms of our scrutiny of this data, and as of this week, that number is down to 74. So it does go up, it does go down, but it does seem to have remained relatively constant over the last 18 months.
Yeah, I do agree with obviously going back longer to see, because going back a number of years, that has absolutely come down substantially. So again, that is important. Yeah, so that's it. Anything else more you want to add, Andrew?
Yeah, sure. Just before we move on from that one, Chair, so it might be helpful for the committee to see a bit more detail on this particular one. So clearly children get put on the Child Protection Register under a number of different categories: physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, neglect. You may want to see that broken down by those categories, all those numbers put in underneath. That's not difficult for us to do over time, but it might get you a bit more richness as far as the number is concerned. I see you nodding on that one, so we will take that forward. And then we've got the number of children receiving care and support. So I'll hand over to Kerry for this one.
And again, really, I think, you know, we've seen we're very generous in our response, if you like, when there are families in need of support. And I say generous in the sense of I would much prefer a family to come to us and to ask for help, and for us to support them right at the beginning, you know, and make sure that that help is what they need at that time, as opposed to us taking a harder line and then you see situations deteriorate further, and then families come back to us in a more difficult situation. So in terms of that number, it is about half of what the number looked like back in sort of 2012. We've seen a rise since COVID, and as I've talked to you previously, you know, there's now more families in need across the country than ever before, and families that would never have come to our attention are in need of help and support. So that's the figure where families are supported by us on a voluntary basis. And I think I'll hand over to Ruth perhaps to give you a little idea of the kind of help the families get on a care and support basis.
So that's a range of, sorry, too short. there's a wide range of support that can be available to families. And I think it's important to note that that can be for wherever they sit within the service. So whether they're in receipt of care and support on the Child Protection Register, so whatever support is available, it's available across the board. So predominantly the support is focusing on parenting, and that's quite a broad range really. So that could just be in terms of improving routines, boundaries, supporting families to get children back into school, because obviously with COVID, a lot of children are reluctant to go to school, or parents aren't in that routine because little children would have missed out on, nursery placements, mother and baby groups through COVID because they were all closed. So it's about getting them back into that routine, reintroducing families into community activities. So we link quite closely with them, Flying Start provisions, childcare, nursery groups, mother and baby groups, libraries. So all of that really, really early intervention work. So it's about supporting families to give them the confidence to get out and about within the community and utilise what's going on locally. We can provide support in terms of helping families with their home conditions. So it's about, again, instilling routines and boundaries in terms of recycling, rubbish, cleaning, all of those things that, again, some parents need some support with. We support families in terms of cooking healthy, nutritious meals on a budget, and that can be taking them physically to do shopping, planning what they're going to be eating in the week, looking at how we can support them because of the cost of living and increasing electricity and gas prices. So looking at accessing slow cookers, air fryers to reduce the rate. So it's about physically doing that with them as well. So parenting is quite a big, broad range. So we look at then supporting young people in terms of their emotional well-being. So we run a number of groups that young people can come to if they would prefer to do it in a group. We also run those programs on an individual basis, and that's about improving their confidence, self-esteem, their well-being, and again, engaging them in community activities because, again, young people after COVID have lost the confidence to go and do a lot of things. So it's about engaging with our partners as well. So community safety, we link in there with some of the youth clubs and things that have been created. We link with the youth service, but it's about physically supporting young people to go out and do that. So parenting is a big one, home conditions, so improving those outcomes for children and young people within those homes. So healthy eating, supporting around teenage behaviours, so ensuring that young people can remain within their families, because as children get older, teenage behaviours are slightly different. So it's about specific techniques then. So we utilise the principles of non-violent resistance, which is MVR parenting. We look at relationship-based play, improving relationships between parents, mediation. So there's a wide range of support that can be offered. So we're trying now to move more towards the support being identified for the family, so not just what's on offer. So if we've got a family that we discuss at our weekly resource panel that we don't know of any specific support within house, then we will make sure that that family is supported, and we will be creative in what we can offer, utilising all of our staff skills.
I think Ellen was going to have a question, but you've totally, totally in full, in fairness. The only question I'd have is, do you know, like when you just mentioned about obviously the support for like bins, certain sort of like youth and things like that, is it then as a social services gives the advice, or do you go to like the education team in waste?
Yeah, so we link closely with waste department in terms of like ensuring that families have got the appropriate recycling bins, that they're aware of what goes in what days they go out. So we have got workers that will go in and support around that. So yeah, we link really closely with a lot of the different departments within the authority.
Any other questions from members? I can't see any. So I'm going to, and that's for noting as well.
Chair,
Oh, sorry.
could I just do the last one? That's okay. Before we move on, no, that's okay. Just before we move on, so the number of children receiving care and support. So the reason why we collate that, Kerry will tell you, is because when we were struggling in children's services a number of years ago, we talked about their system being overheated. and that was when the number of children receiving care and support was above 1,000, 1,200. So it's important that we monitor that. As Kerry said, anything between 650, 750, that sort of area would be about what we'd expect. But as it goes, if it started moving towards 1,000, then that would mean that there would be particular pressures on our social workers, a lack of responsiveness from our service, and we'd start to get worried about overheating again. So that's one for you to watch as we go forward.
Come back in and just discuss around the team around the family as well. So we've got a separate team that sits within children's services that's linked with families first. So that's an ever-growing team, but there's kind of movement between. So team around the family would be early intervention and prevention service. So you may have a family that are open on a care and support basis, but still need ongoing support. So they would step down to continue to be supported by TAF. So it's kind of just elongating that support then really. And then if things change, they can step back up then to be a care and support. So I think I haven't got the figures for the number of children and people open to TAF, but could certainly get that. But that's just another layer, if you like, in terms of ongoing support for family. That can be done going into statutory services, but that there's a flow between that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a busy team actually, isn't it, TAF?
Yes.
Mm.
Okay, and thank you, Chair. And the final one is about re-registrations of children on the Child Protection Register. When I introduced this one to you, there's particular interest within the committee. It's an indicator that we are or aren't getting our risk management right. So if children are going back onto the Child Protection Register too quickly, then that indicates maybe that they've been taken off too soon. You asked for this one to in particular to be on the performance suite, and I don't know whether Kerry or Chris is going to talk to this. Chris, very briefly.
Yeah, more than happy to take this one. So it's just to correct the record, it's not a percentage, it is a number. So it is one over the course of the last year. And I think we've touched upon it before that when a child comes off the register, it is a multi-agency decision. So lots of partners involved in this particular case decided that the threshold for them remaining on the register was no longer made out. Case remained open, and then for other matters arising, it was decided to move back into this space. So the manager overseeing these cases flags these cases, our data flags these cases, and then we do discuss the trajectory of these cases to take any learning from these cases to feedback across the wider service and indeed the partnership in terms of how we perceive risk and manage risk moving forward. So this is an important marker for us that we keep a close eye on.
So obviously we've just got the chart here. So how long was the child off it before coming back on it?
I'd have to come back to you. That one, I don't have the number at my fingertips.
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah, that's no problem. If you can just send that, and then we'll circulate it out to members. But again, that is an important one, and I think it's also important to see the time between coming off and going back on, and basically we could actually look if there's any trends then starting in that type of area as well. Yeah, so that's great. Anything more now you'd like to add?
No, thank you,
Chair. Right. That brings us to the end of obviously our papers, except now the selections of any future items for the Scrutiny Forward Work programme. So I'm just going to hand you over to Pamela.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just go through it quickly. Members will have had sight of both the Cabinet and Scrutiny Forward Work programmes in the agenda pack. Members and officers would have had an invitation to additional Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 8th of April. This has been arranged in consultation with the Chair, and the following reports will be considered at that meeting. Purchase of emergency accommodation to elevate homelessness. Western Bay Regional Partnership Board, that was originally due to come today, but that's been moved to the additional meeting, and an update on social services transformation programmes. The following reports have been removed. Permission to consult and pilot an alternative nighttime support. Officers have advised that this report is not required at this time and will provide more information on the way forward when available. The second report is the commissioning intentions for Housing First service. This has been removed from the Cabinet Forward Work programme as a decision is no longer required. And the Young People Housing Support Grant Funded Services permissions to retender has been removed, as it can now be dealt with under the new contract procedure rules. So that's been removed from the Cabinet Forward Work Programme. The community safety update that was due to come today has been removed, as the contents of that report will be included in an all-members seminar which is taking place on the 24th of April, which will give an understanding of the work of the community safety team. And finally, there's a report that's been moved on the Cabinet Forward Work Programme. It's the permission to tender for emergency accommodation for women, violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. Members have been advised of this change, and members have not selected this for pre-decision scrutiny. So I'll hand you back to the Chair unless any members got any questions on any items.
No, there are none. So I'm just going to go straight on to agenda item 7. Urgent items, we have none, and then it's the close of business. So thank you all for coming.